Hi everyone, welcome to Disciples Path. My name is Emily. Today I'm going to be talking about President Nelson's passing and what we can expect to happen over the next week or two as we anticipate the first presidency being reorganized. When my husband woke me up on early Sunday morning, I wasn't expecting to wake up to the news that our prophet had passed away. But I also wasn't surprised. He was 101 years old. So, as much as I would have loved for him to live longer and stay with us longer and teach us longer, I knew he would have to leave us sooner rather than later. So, I am sad for us. I'm sad for his family, who we all have to continue to go on without him. But I am happy for him that he gets to move on to the next step in his progression. And in fact, while I'm not going to go over this, I'm actually more sad and upset about the tragedy that happened just a few hours later in Michigan. I'm not going to discuss that at this point, but that has been much more disturbing to my personal peace than losing our prophet has been. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is that my husband actually, for quite some time, he has kept a spreadsheet documenting the line of succession and the seniority of the apostles and the changes that have happened in church authority over the years. He has a variety of pages on this spreadsheet. This one has to do with the succession of prophets. The other pages that are in here, this one has to do with every change that has happened in the quorum of the 12 apostles, not just prophets passing away, but other apostles passing away, or in some of the earlier days of the church, certain apostles being excommunicated. I'm not going to go over that today. He also has a list of the current apostles. He has the historical data on the members of the 12 apostles, etc. Again, I'm not going to go over those. Today, I'm going to be focusing on this particular sheet and the information that's contained in it. For those of you that can read this sheet on your devices, the blue lines, other than making the page easier to read, the blue lines indicate the death of the presiding prophet of the church, but the white line underneath each of the blue lines shows the official date where the de facto leader did in fact become the president of the church. When Joseph Smith died on the 27th of June, 1844, Brigham Young became the de facto leader of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. However, it took 3.5 years for the first presidency to be officially and formally reorganized and for Brigham Young to become the next prophet. So from the 27th of June of 1844 to the 27th of December, 1847, 3.5 years. When Brigham Young passed away, I have my notes here. When Brigham Young passed away on the 29th of August in 1877, John Taylor was the de facto leader of the church, but he wasn't set apart as the president of the church until the 10th of October, 1880. So that was just a little over 3 years. So 3 years, 1+ months. When John Taylor passed away on the 25th of July, 1877, Wilford Woodruff became the de facto leader of the church, but he wasn't set apart until the 7th of April, 1889, which was about a year and 8+ months. So these three reorganizations of the first presidency took a significant amount of time. And there were interesting things that happened during those times, which I'm not going to go over here. And I'm not going to speculate as to what all factors went into it. I haven't done the research on that, and so I'm not going to go over that here. Those three periods of time were significantly longer than any other time in the church when we've had to reorganize the first presidency. Moving forward, when Wilford Woodruff died on the 2nd of September, 1889, Lorenzo Snow became the de facto leader, but he was officially made the president of the church on the 13th of September, 1898, 11 days later. I'm not going to go over all of these dates. You can read them here if you want, but the period of time from the previous president's death to the next president's formal setting apart was definitely more brief. So, Joseph Fielding Smith, it took them 7 days after the death of Lorenzo Snow for him to become the new president. Heber J. Grant, it took 4 days. George Albert Smith, it took 7 days. David O. McKay, it took 5 days. Joseph Fielding Smith, 5 days. Harold B. Lee, 5 days. Spencer W. Kimball, 4 days. Ezra Taft Benson, 5 days. Howard W. Hunter, 6 days. Gordon B. Hinckley, 9 days. Thomas S. Monson, 7 days. Russell M. Nelson, 12 days. So we generally look at anywhere from a week to maybe upwards of 2 weeks before we have a reorganization of the first presidency. During that time between the death of the previous prophet and the setting apart of the new prophet, the governing body of the church is the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, which most of the time is about 14 members of the Quorum of the 12. So now going down to the bottom of this spreadsheet, President Nelson passed away on the 27th of September, and Dallin H. Oakes is the de facto leader of the church. He is the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and until he is set apart as the prophet, the governing body of the church will be the Quorum of the 12, which currently has 14 members in it. So there were a couple of articles that I was looking at while I was researching for this episode. This article came out, and the whole article is wonderful. I'll put a link for it in the description box below if you want to read it, if you haven't already. But there was an interesting note in here that I found while I was studying. It is that a successor is not expected to be formally chosen by the church's Quorum of the 12 Apostles until after President Nelson's funeral, and at the time of this article, the details were still pending. Since then, we have found out that the funeral is scheduled to be on October 7th of this year, so next Tuesday. My husband and I had been speculating as to whether they would reorganize the first presidency ahead of General Conference, because we couldn't think of a time after a prophet had died when the first presidency had not been organized prior to a General Conference. And that may have had something to do with the way that the dates landed. Most of the prophets did not pass away this close to General Conference. So we kind of wondered if we would get another first presidency prior to General Conference, but it's looking like that's probably not the case. So we probably shouldn't expect a new first presidency until sometime maybe late next week. The brethren typically meet together on Thursdays. I don't know if they would hold a special meeting after President Nelson's funeral and make decisions before that typical Thursday meeting, or they may just wait until that Thursday meeting and then the announcements will come shortly thereafter. So during this time, I've noticed that while there are a lot of people who are mourning, there are a lot of people who are remembering President Nelson with joy, there is also a lot of anxiousness that I've seen in some members of the church. They don't know how things are going to go. We don't know what kind of direction President Oakes is going to go in his presidency. And so it's the unknown. All that we know is that he is the Lord's chosen and that the church will continue to move forward. This is the Lord's church. It's not Russell M. Nelson's church. It's not Dallin H. Oakes' church. This church is in his hands. And that made me think of a scripture that we recently studied in Come Follow Me from Doctrine and Covenants, section 101, verse 16. Therefore, let your hearts be comforted concerning Zion. For all flesh is in mine hands. Be still and know that I am God. We don't have anything to worry about. This is a period of change. It is something that we're going to wonder about. It's something that we're going to speculate on until we kind of get our feet under us again. We are a little bit in shock that our prophet has passed away. We're wondering how things are going to move forward, but they will move forward because this is the Lord's church. So, what's next? Another article from the church gives some insight into what will happen in the days, potentially weeks, following President Nelson's passing. This article says that when the president of the church passes away, the following events take place. The first presidency is automatically dissolved. The two counselors in the first presidency revert to their places of seniority in the quorum of the 12 apostles. Seniority is determined by the date on which a person was ordained to the 12, not by age. The quorum of the 12 apostles, now numbering 14 and headed by the senior apostle, who is currently Dallin H. Oakes, assumes church leadership. The senior apostle presides at a meeting of the quorum of the 12 to consider two alternative propositions. One, should the first presidency be reorganized at this time? This is typically what happens. Through most of the history of the church, the first presidency has been reorganized in fairly short order. Or two, should the church continue to function with the quorum of the 12 presiding? This did happen several times in the early days of the church. After discussion, a formal motion is made and accepted by the quorum of the 12 apostles. If a motion to reorganize the first presidency is passed, the quorum of the 12 unanimously selects the new president of the church. The new president chooses two counselors, and the three of them become the new first presidency. Throughout the history of the church, the longest-serving apostle has always become the president of the church when the first presidency has been reorganized. Following the reorganization of the first presidency, the apostle who has served the second longest is sustained as the president of the quorum of the 12. When the second longest serving apostle has also been called into the first presidency as a counselor, the third longest serving apostle becomes acting president of the 12. We've seen this happen with the most recent first presidency. When Dallin H. Oakes was called in as a counselor in the first presidency, President Holland became the acting president of the quorum of the 12 apostles. And the last step is the president of the quorum of the 12, along with the rest of the apostles, sets apart the new president of the church through a formal laying on of hands. Since the church was formally organized on April 6, 1830, there have been 17 presidents, including President Russell M. Nelson. So this is what we can expect to happen sometime in the next week to upwards of 2 weeks, I would imagine. That would be my guess. With all of this information in mind, looking forward to this upcoming weekend's General Conference, which I'm very excited for. I'm also very interested to see how this will be handled. This will be the first General Conference in many years that we have not had a first presidency presiding. From my cursory research, this will be the first General Conference without a first presidency since the time between John Taylor's death and Wilford Woodruff was set apart. These would be these 3 periods of time, the 3.5 years between Joseph Smith's death and Brigham Young, between Brigham Young's death and John Taylor's time, and between John Taylor's time and the time that Wilford Woodruff was set apart. We have not had a General Conference since, what would it be, 1889? We have not had a General Conference without a first presidency since then. That's been a very long time. I don't know if that will change much of the proceedings of General Conference. The people who are speaking have been selected to speak for quite some time. They've been working on their talks for quite some time. They probably even know the order in which they're meant to speak. But given the event of President Nelson's death, it may be that they'll have to adjust a few things and reorder what happens. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. The point is that this is the Lord's church. And even when we're thrown these little curveballs, he has a plan. And General Conference will still move forward. We will still have wonderful revelation that is given. And we will still have a plan for our focus, for what we should be working on for the next 6 months. And my plan is that once we have the General Conference talks available, I will be studying them like I did for the April General Conference and finding little pearls of wisdom that have to do with discipleship. So I'm looking forward with faith, knowing that whatever the next 6 months brings, the talks that we get in General Conference will help sustain us, will help prepare us, and strengthen us during that time, no matter what happens. So that's what I have for today. And until next time, if you like this video, please like. If you have any comments, please leave them down below. If you know anyone who could benefit from this video, please share it with them. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you next time.